what's that Snake always says? Kept you waiting, huh? Oh my god, dude. Damn, that's cool. Oh shit, it's Silence. It's about freaking time. I was hoping for a release date, preferably this year, but I will take the promise that'll be out in 2025. So excited. Anyway, good evening, folks. Got another Bladeslinger vlog for you. So, yeah, Nintendo Direct. Nintendo just put out another Direct. And, like, the big headline for a lot of people is, of course, Metroid Prime Beyond. But, you know, the entire Direct was just fantastic in general. There's so many cool looking games coming out. I mean, you got Mario and Luigi, that's going to be a lot of fun. Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection. You may have dated one of my videos, Capcom, but kudos for you for getting the lawyers to sort that mess out. Like, it was just such a great presentation. But as I reflected on it, I started to think about something else that occurred earlier this month, and that was Sony's State of Play presentation, which I guess you could say is sort of their answer to Nintendo Direct in a way. And people are talking about this Nintendo Direct. People are still talking about it, even though like it's been a few days after. But you don't hear a lot of people talking about the State of Play presentation. And I thought long and hard about if I should even talk about this topic or not, if I should compare and contrast how Nintendo do this unique form of marketing. But I decided against doing that because I don't want to come off as, you know, hating Sony or overly praising Nintendo or just crapping on Microsoft, because I'd have to talk about them too, since, you know, they're part of the conversation as well. So instead, what I thought I'd do for this vlog is just talk about, you know, the genius of Nintendo Direct and why it is that Nintendo has done so well with it and why I think it's really integral in their success in the past, you know, decade or so. So first of all, let me give you guys a little lesson on how you used to market video games. And I should state for the record, I do have an idea of what I'm talking about here. I actually do have a business degree specializing in marketing from the University of Winthrop. I wouldn't call myself an expert because I've never actually worked in the field, but I do have some idea of how all this is supposed to work. So back in the day, after Nintendo took over with the NES, like the only real way to market consoles or video games at the time were through stuff like magazines. I mean, you could put your stuff on TV too, and Nintendo was so dominant at the time, they actually had the money to spend to make that happen. But magazines were the primary way you did that. And you also took your games to E3 every year, you know, a bunch of trade shows. But the trade shows were probably a lot tougher to use as a marketing tool versus the magazines, because magazines by design were intended to be cheap. You know, cheaply produced, easily disposable, not intended to last very long. So, the trade shows, on the other hand, have a tendency to just be really expensive. You actually have to go to the promoters, you have to buy, you know, a slot to actually speak, you need to have games to present, you need to find a way to present games, and that can get expensive in its own right. And you're basically praying that everything you do actually catches fire at the show, because if nobody is talking about it, then you basically just wasted millions of dollars on that presentation. And that was the norm for the longest time, up until from like when Nintendo came to market with NES up until like the tail end of the 2010s. But where things really started to change in regards to how developers market their games was really in 2011 when Nintendo started doing the Nintendo Direct series. It was an idea by Satoru Iwata, who was, in charge of Nintendo at the time. And it was basically just a fun video series where he would come on screen and just talk about the games that were coming out at the time. And that proved to be very popular on YouTube. And by the time we got to the end of the 2010s, Nintendo was actually putting all their focus on Nintendo Directs as opposed to, going to E3. I think it was in 2019, maybe 2018, they actually decided not to go to E3 at all, instead just, putting all that money into a really big Nintendo Direct. And since then, that's been their primary vehicle for announcing games. And that put them in a really good place in 2020 when the pandemic hit, because, it wasn't a big deal that E3 was shut down that year. And since then, every time a Nintendo Direct comes out, everyone gets excited because, that there's going to be at least one game in there that will make you excited. And, even with Nintendo Directs that, never really impressed me, there was always one game that, I would end up going out to buy, and more often than not, there would be multiple games I wanted to pick up. So, what is it about Nintendo Directs that is so genius? Well, for starters, it's just a really cheap and efficient way to present your games. You really don't have to, put forth the same amount of production value that you would have for, say, a press conference at E3. Just need to have people talking against a green screen, and then just have people focus on the games. You don't need to do any of those silly shenanigans like you saw Microsoft doing when they were trying and failing to launch the Xbox One. So that on its own is a good idea, but the other big thing that I see with Nintendo Direct is that it also ends up being a really interesting tool for the sake of marketing. And I'm not just talking about, getting the game out in front of people, but also for actually gauging people's interest in the game. Now, when a Nintendo Direct comes on, everyone's going to watch it. So, that doesn't mean that every game that was in that presentation is going to be something everyone's going to get into. But I've noticed that whenever Nintendo does Nintendo Directs, right after they start releasing the individual trailers on YouTube. And that might seem like a strange practice to people. Why would you do that? I mean, don't you want people to watch the Direct? Well, everyone's going to watch the Direct because, while they will release the trailers afterwards, they won't show everything with that, and they do stagger the release of the trailers. The reason they do that is because, for starters, it's convenient for people who weren't able to watch the Direct, or, for example, when this Direct came out, I was at work at the time. I didn't get to watch it until I got home at 7 o'clock that night. And by that point, I had already watched the Metroid Prime 4 trailer because I was just so excited for that. And that's important because it shows what people are really interested in. They can look at the individual trailers, the viewer counts for that, and based on that, they can sort of get an idea of what people are looking at, what they're really interested in, and then they can use that to build a better marketing platform. They're basically collecting data in a manner that's, is a little more justified. It's different from how a lot of marketing people do it these days, which is just buying data from Facebook or whatever company is monitoring your browsing history or whatever. But that's another one of the big reasons why the Nintendo Direct works so well. It just provides Nintendo with so much information on what people are enjoying. But the main thing for me, and this kind of plays into why Nintendo has done so well with Nintendo Directs, whereas, whenever Sony tries to do something similar, they end up failing epically, and that's in what they choose to show and how often they show it. There's only ever one state of play address from Sony, and because of that, you're not really keeping a lookout for it. So, like, when the state of play was happening, I was completely unaware of it. But whenever there's a Nintendo Direct, I always hear about it. And it's not just because I'm a Nintendo fan. I'm a Sony fan too. The only one of the big three I'm not fond of is Microsoft, but that's a story for another time. But anyway, Nintendo, they'll typically do 1, 2, maybe 3 Nintendo Directs a year. And in addition to that, they'll do smaller Directs too. Sometimes they'll just... You got the big ones like you just saw where, they're just announcing everything that's on the docket for the year. But then they'll have smaller ones dedicated to indie developers. They'll have partner showcases. Even Directs that are dedicated to a specific game. I believe they had one when Breath of the Wild was about to release. And that frequency of release is good for audience retention, but it also kind of plays into another one of the more brilliant aspects of doing these, and that it really shows you so much of what is coming out on the Nintendo Switch. I noticed with the state of play, mostly what they were showing off was just, AAA stuff. And a lot of it, I believe, is stuff that Sony really has their hands in. But you'll look at any Nintendo Plus, and it's not just games that Nintendo has their hand in. It's a lot of indie games. It's a lot of third-party games. Like, you have Capcom announcing, their fighting collections on Nintendo Switch. You would think they would want to, announce that maybe at the State of Play or something like that, since, there would be an audience for that on the PlayStation 5. There would be an audience for that on the Xbox or PC, because, that's where Street Fighter 6 is right now. But they choose to announce it on Nintendo Directs because they know people are watching. And they probably have to pay Nintendo in order to get that time slot in there, so Nintendo's making money off of that. But by showing all these different games, Nintendo is also setting them up to make money in the future too. With the State of Play video, all those games that were coming out, like, they were games that I guarantee are just ones Sony has a hand in, and they aren't really promoting anything else that's coming out on the PlayStation 5, which is just really dumb because, well, a lot of people don't realize is just because Nintendo or Sony or Microsoft doesn't have their name on the game directly, they still make money off of every single game that is released on their console. In order for developers to make a game for any of the consoles, they have to get a license from whatever company put out that console. They have to buy development kits, and they also have to buy the means to, produce the games. From Nintendo, for example, you gotta buy the cartridges for the Nintendo Switch. So regardless of the fact that they don't have their name on it, Nintendo is still making a percentage on any game that is sold on the Nintendo Switch, be it digitally or physically. And that is really the brilliance of Nintendo Direct, because they're just not just showing the big ticket items that are coming out for the Nintendo Switch. They are actually showing so much that is available on the console, and because of that, they're probably boosting their sales a great deal. So while you could argue that PlayStation probably has more units in the wild, probably has a bigger user base, Nintendo is probably selling more games than either of them. And in the video game industry, that is the key to success, because you do not make money off the hardware. You always sell the console at a loss, and then you make money on the software sales, which is definitely something that a lot of other manufacturers have lost sight of in recent years, especially Microsoft. I mean, they got barely anything to market their console with anymore. I bought an Xbox, and I barely play it because there's just nothing that interests me on there. There's Halo, there's Gears of War, but that's about it. But with Nintendo Switch, yeah, there's so many games on it, and I always think, probably gonna give up on this thing in a while. But Nintendo always shows me something that brings me back to the console, and the PS5. Man, there's already talk of a PS6 right now, and that bothers me because, like, the PS5 hasn't been out that long, and really, there's only been a handful of games that really show off what the thing can do. You got Ratchet & Clank, A Rift Apart, Spider-Man 2. I think that's it, actually. So, and I find it interesting that, like, people are so fixated on that. They're also fixated on the fact that Nintendo is probably due to put out the successor to the Switch. But I remember right before this Nintendo Direct came out, they put out a statement saying that the successor to the Switch wasn't going to be talked about. So what I think is Nintendo is working on that, but they aren't planning to do it anytime soon. So they're just doing what they're supposed to do. They are focusing on games, and that to me is the genius of Nintendo Direct. There's just no bullshit with it. You have people from Nintendo, but apart from that, it's all about the games. It's just very pure. It just feels very pure, and I really appreciate that. With the state of play, I just kind of felt like I was being marketed to, and yes, you are being marketed to with these presentations, but it was just AAA stuff that did not impress in the slightest. And I guarantee the only reason they were showing it was because they were going to be charging $60, $70 for every game that was shown. And apart from the Silent Hill 2 remake, which I'm only cautiously optimistic about, there was very little else in that presentation that really caught my eye. There was also something in that presentation that kind of pissed me off, which was the Until Dawn remake. Why are you remaking Until Dawn? You can play Until Dawn on the PS5. You know how you do that? You get a copy of Until Dawn for the PS4, and you put it in your PS5. Bam! And guess what? Game still holds up just fine. Like, when that game comes out, I'm just going to tell people, just buy the original. It's $20. So, yeah, that sort of irritated me, but again, I'm getting off topic here. Like, that's just the genius of Nintendo Direct. Nintendo has just found a way to market their games, market other people's games, increase the revenue that they get from, software sales on their console in a way that doesn't feel manipulative in the slightest. Like, every time a Nintendo Direct comes on, it's just something fun, and that's why you see so many videos of people just reacting to what's being announced whenever a Nintendo Direct comes out. And it's just a fun way of community engagements, and yeah, Nintendo, excellent job, top of the class. Really, Sony and Microsoft need to be taking notes. Does Microsoft even have a presentation series like this on YouTube? So, now with all that being said, do I think that PlayStation and Microsoft need to start marketing their games in a similar manner? And in short, yes. Because as much as I've bagged on Sony this video, and despite how happy I am to bag on Microsoft, I actually do not say any of that with any kind of malice. If anything, it's more encouragement, because a lot of people don't realize that competition in any market is a good thing, because if you have competition, that's pushing the other developers to be better than one another. So yeah, I do want to see if Sony pick up their game in regards to marketing. I want to see more of what's on PS5. I want to see more of what they have to offer. And like, I know they're not doing a very good job, because earlier this month they released Sly Cooper on the PS5. I was completely unaware of that, and a couple days ago I heard that was a thing. Immediately bought it on the console. That would have been a perfect game to show off on. Like, they just aren't thinking. Like, think about a Nintendo Direct. Like, whenever they add something to the Switch Online service, they always make a big deal of that on the Nintendo Direct, and for good reason, because they want people to buy that pass, whereas there's rarely ever any reason. Sony never gives you a reason to buy a PlayStation Plus. So, yeah, Nintendo Direct, it's absolutely brilliant. Wonderful piece of marketing. Sony, Microsoft, take notes, because I have money, I want to give it to you, but I'm not going to give it to you if I don't know what I'm buying. Nintendo is telling me what they're buying, and that's why I'm giving my money right now. I've already gone to GameStop and asked if I could pre-order some stuff, so that should tell you how effective these Nintendo Directs are. But anyway, that's what I got to say on the matter, guys. I'll tune in next time. Take care.